Hey, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of Unstructured Unlocked. I'm Michelle Gouveia.
And I'm your co-host, Tom Wild. Michelle, we've got a repeat guest today. Very excited about this. Parul Kalgreen, who is the founder and CEO of Unstructured Consulting. Parul works with AI and technology strategy consulting, specifically in the insurance industry, and has just a wealth of experience and knowledge and a sort of very broad set of observations that she gets from her global travels doing this. So Parul, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me back. It's really, really fun to be back because it was fun last time as well. Yeah, we're very excited to have you back for the conversation.
Well, today we want to talk about a few different aspects of the industry, an industry that is dynamic and always changing. But there's been, continued M&A in the space among the carriers. Certainly, we've seen tons of M&A in the MGA space, driven a lot by the inflow of private equity and a lot of roll-ups. Today, we want to talk a bit about M&A in general in the space and how the transition from hard market to soft market could be driving some of that. You obviously, Parul, have had a lot of experience on the M&A side and are sort of well-positioned to offer some perspectives and opinions on that. So that's our topic for today.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting. So I'll have to go hark back to my investment analyst training for that. But yeah, all good.
Well, I know offline, we've talked a bunch about your firsthand experience with M&A in the insurance space. If you think about AXA and Catalent and a few others, maybe kind of set the table for us a bit. What typically drives M&A in this space, and what are some of the markers of success and maybe failure is a tough word, but failure as well, in when you're thinking about M&A as a strategy as a carrier?
So it really depends on who is the buyer. Is it a sponsor, financial sponsor, like a private equity player, which was the case with the Aspen deal? Aspen's very interesting. So 2019, Aspen was not performing well when Apollo bought it, and they bought it for $2.6 billion. And then early in the year, I think May or so, they decided to float, I want to say 300 million or so of it on stock exchange, just to crystallize the value. And at that time, the value they crystallized from 2019 onward was 2.8 billion worth of value. And at the same time, around September, a strategic buyer who was looking for another rationale for buying, which is macro capital reallocation from Japanese market to a more vibrant US market, Sompo, came in and said that they want to redeploy their surplus capital and buy this Aspen, which had turned around into really, really well-performing specialty player with tight loss ratios and was doing quite well under the new CEO. I think he's called Mark Cloutier, who was put in place by Apollo. And they said that we'll take it from you for 3.6 billion. So that was an offer that the shareholders couldn't refuse. So that was the rationale for that deal. Why do strategics buy? Strategics buy as you acquire a specialty portfolio because you have gaps. There's a geographic reach that you want to buy into, say for Sompo, US markets. They weren't very big, or Bermuda, which is Aspen's base. And then distribution channels as well. It really takes a lot of time to organically build capabilities within any industry, and M&A short circuits that. But it's really, really important, therefore, to have very strong strategic reason for any insurer, why am I buying this? So I would say three things that are driving deals at the moment: for capital market timing for financial sponsors, strategic fill-ins for insurers, and macro capital reallocation for insurers such as Sompo, who want to go into a market which is more vibrant than their home market.
Well, I want to dive into a little bit deeper one thing you touched on, which was the rationale of why strategic buyers pursue M&A, and bring it back to, we've been seeing a trend where a lot of digital first MGAs, or even, I guess they might still be MGAs, but even digital first, like parametric insurance solutions have been getting acquired. There's been just a pattern of a lot of those, whether they're small acquisitions or big ones, that consolidation is happening. And just curious your thoughts on, so obviously there's the distribution and gain access to market piece, but how much of the underlying technology component is a driver for some of those consolidations or acquisitions?
That's a very interesting question. Actually, much before the current digital MGA acquisition, we had a big acquisition of Simply Business by Travelers.
Mhm.
And that was essentially to bring in Simply Business's digital first model as an accelerant to SME broking and SME business, MGA business in US. So there was a clear set rationale that we want the digital platform. So what the digital first players do is they are both accelerants and pressure points. On the one hand, they have a proven new model of faster distribution because they have been able to distribute, cleaner onboarding. And incumbents, therefore, when they buy them, they think that we can shortcut our own transformation or tap into a new market if that particular digital MG has created a new market. So that's one reason. The other reason is that these digital MGAs also raise the bar on customer experience. The CX is so superior, and also inherent cost efficiency of not having so many old legacy systems to work with. So that also brings in something that the buyers are missing. So buying a nimble digital player, it doesn't automatically make you nimble, but you've got to say that if I'm buying this and my rationale was to become more innovative, then you have to protect that acquisition by protecting the culture, having governance such that they have a degree of autonomy. Otherwise, you're bringing in a very innovative player into a large legacy organization and killing it with bureaucracy. So that's not something you want to do.
Do you think that the sort of transition towards a soft market, is it a little bit like the tide going out, or is this going to expose the carriers who are the least efficient? Because I guess the hypothesis that I've seen is that obviously as price becomes more competitive, you're going to have to write more policies to still hit your book target, right? And if you're not efficient, trying to brute force that's going to be very painful. How have you, in your travels and your discussions with carriers, how do they think about that?
So soft market is a proven historical point of consolidation. And the rationale is consolidation brings efficiency or economies of scale,
Yeah.
and integration of two different tech stacks into a single tech stack will bring efficiency. And that really gets compounded or becomes more urgent when there is a rate pressure downwards. So that's always been the case, that
Yeah.
softer market will drive consolidation, be it broker consolidation, and the weaker players who are inefficient will be eaten up by bigger players who are looking for top line growth, whereas the rate is not bringing that growth anymore. So that tends to be quite an accelerant. And efficiency play, of course, the rationale that is always set out is it's both revenue synergies and cost synergies. And in my experience of leading such M&A, cost synergies and revenue synergies stated on the paper and what's realized are really two different things. And what drives a synergy realization is monitoring it, having a transformation program around it, and cultural integration. So these three things are super important if through the current M&A spree, we're actually wanting to realize any kind of benefit for the buyers.
So how do you think AI impacts the strategy there? I mean, as you said, so efficiency is key, especially in a soft market. I mean, it's always something you're driving towards, but in a soft market, and we've seen a ton of new insurtechs coming up all that leverage AI to improve underwriting workflows or claims workflows. There's obviously the submission piece that fits on both of those sides. What are either the biggest pain points or the solutions that would impact efficiency and underwriting claims the best during maybe, consolidation or just in general in a soft market?
Well, it's a good question, and maybe Tom could chip in from what he's seeing as a supplier into the market. Because efficiency is so highlighted during the soft market because you want to protect your bottom line, you look at what are the big areas where you're losing or where you're expending costs. And inevitably in specialty insurance, that's around underwriting and claims. So those are two big areas where you see focus of investment in technology, be it AI or any other data-driven triages, straight through processing and AI-assisted decisioning. So that tends to be quite a big focus around underwriting. And the other big area where insurers will spend between 40 to 60% of the gross written premium every year is around claims. So there is a lot of effort being put into automation of first notification of loss, early claims triage, putting simple claims cases into straight through processing, and rather than having multiple handover, and also in terms of integrating into vendor ecosystem. So if you are a motor insurer, how do you integrate into garages to find the cheapest possible, fastest solution to a motor collision incident? So that those are the two big areas where you see a lot of thought and a lot of momentum during soft market when it comes to IT spend.
Obviously you've been part of processes that are both for underwriting workflows or claims workflows, and, Indico can do that. Do you see a shift in the types of use cases or like RFPs that are out there? Is it more underwriting? Is it more claims? Is it more targeted towards one or even one specific workflow within either of those? Or is it still just broad?
I think it's split pretty evenly. I think that carriers are trying to increase efficiency and save money in both those categories. As Pearl mentioned, those are both big areas of spend, and controlling those and reducing those has a direct impact to the bottom line. I'd even add one more, which is sort of policy servicing and broker servicing.
Yeah.
Are other big, kind of high areas of overhead. And so we sort of think of it as the front door of the carrier. You've got lots and lots of unstructured data coming in the front door. I still joke half seriously that email is the biggest API in insurance. That is really how most information gets exchanged even today. And that the decades long data standardization effort, it just hasn't really panned out. I had an interesting question from a very large tech platform player in the space. And he said to me, do I think that Gen AI is sort of the death of data standards? And it was a really interesting question, and I hadn't really thought of it that way. But my answer to him was yes, I think it is, right? So the ability and the promise of Gen AI and agentic AI to basically be this interpreter may negate the need forever for data standards, right? That the ability to interpret across pieces of the value chain, broker to carrier, customer to customer, industry to industry, that's a fascinating hypothesis that, this notion that we need data standards may be over.
That's very interesting because I hear that insurers are still struggling with data quality and the legacy core system, and that's a big blocker to mass scale adoption of AI. Even yesterday at Lloyd's, that was one of the first questions one of the people from the audience said, we just don't have clean data. We work on multiple systems and multiple data standards, and automation is just amplifying bad inputs. So when you say that, I'm thinking, so what makes you optimistic versus what makes these practitioners pessimistic?
Yeah, I would tease that apart a little bit. So I think that there's the notion of data standards and there's the notion of data quality, and I think they're different. I do think Gen AI and agentic AI has the potential to negate the need for data standards, meaning you can use it as your sort of mass translator. It still has to produce data quality, and to me, data quality is normalized data that can be ingested in your downstream systems. Very simple things like date and currency formatting, just to use kind of the usual examples. Filling in missing data and validating missing data through third-party solutions. Those are all things that Gen AI and agentic AI has great promise for, right? Because you can use multi-step reasoning and you can have it perform these tasks, step by step. Let's look at sort of like an SOV as an example, a schedule of value. You can imagine that you get an SOV from a broker and it's missing a bunch of information about a fleet of vehicles, right? Well, that's something that agentic AI can fill in quite readily, and that thus improves your data quality. So I do tease them apart, standards versus quality. I think data quality, that's an absolutely valid point, and I do think it still is one of the biggest challenges in the industry.
I think that's a good distinction, because I wasn't distinguishing data standard or defining it the way you just broke it down, Tom. And I think that makes sense. And I do wonder what like the regulators will think about data being generated as part of it versus, and I don't want to say it's not validated or verifiable, but you can't necessarily trace it back directly as you could if it was coming from a broker or from a vendor. And so I do wonder how that will be treated, but I do understand the optimism from that initial conversation that you referenced, in that sense specifically.
I mean, I fully buy into what you're setting out, what the market or LMA says when they say that you got to use Accord or CDR is the burden placed by different markets, which is carriers, asking for different things. Mm-hmm. So brokers setting standards, and if you move brokers, you got to adopt new sets of data that you as an insured are supposed to send on, and the things are labeled differently. So there's a lot of burden of this, which is then borne by the insured, who quite frankly should be able to have a much easier life and very standardized set of data that should be provided. So that's the point that LMA is making when LMA goes out and says that, which is London Market Association, that we must insist on data standards. What would you say why they should be optimistic that even with no single data standard, we may be able to get great results and customers will be happy?
Yeah, I think that let's compare it to personal lines, right? So personal lines, data standards and electronic data exchange became very viable, but it primarily became viable because of mobile, right? So now as a consumer, when you interact with your insurance providers, it's almost all mobile and you have to use their mobile app, right? There really isn't, you can call them or you can use their mobile app. There isn't a lot of choice. And the other reason is they had market power, right? So a big auto carrier has market power over each of their customers, right? I can't dictate to my auto carrier the data standards I want them to use. They would not even know what to think of that. Contrast that to specialty and commercial, there is no market power. All the players in the space have equal market power. And this is why I think Lloyd's has struggled to create and install standards, because you've got so many voices in the room and no one wants to give, and so you're in this endless loop of trying to find the lowest common denominator. And in insurance, that's a difficult rubric, right? Because it is a complex business. There isn't a lowest common denominator that's going to cover enough of the market. And so data standard efforts continue to struggle. I won't say they failed, but they certainly have struggled. And we've got another delay in Blueprint 2. So I kind of see a race, right? So there's a race to install standards. There's a parallel race being run by Gen AI and agentic AI to become so adept at translating disparate data into a sort of canonical representation, that perhaps the need for standards go away. That I use the analogy of the Tower of Babel analogy, right? Like, would it be easier if everyone on the planet spoke the same language? Well, you could argue yes, whatever the language was. You could argue yes, that can, as a standard, that would make things easier. But it's also completely impractical and implausible. So are we at a point soon where, while I'm speaking to you in language A, my, AirPod is going to translate live, which it can do now, into language B. So it's kind of an interesting analogy. If I was going to make a bet, I would say that technology is going to win that race, because historically technology has won races like that.
That's very positive. We should just let London Market Association say, well, just don't worry too much about the data standards.
Parul mentioned that the premise around M&A in terms of hopes of cost and revenue synergy rarely come to life the way the parties hope, right? It's very difficult to take an investment banking deck and turn it into reality. And I think we're seeing some parallels to investments in automation and Gen AI, where the hypothesized savings and efficiency gains haven't materialized as often as they should. MIT, the study that's been widely quoted, MIT is saying that 95% of Gen AI projects have failed to achieve ROI. I read it. I think it's a little bit too sort of simple a conclusion. I think that, because I think you can't say that everyone using Cursor as a Gen AI code development tool have failed, right? That's not true. So this 95% percentage is the numerators and the denominators there, I think, were maybe carefully crafted to paint a story. I also, the vast majority of customers that I'm exposed to and that we work with have successfully deployed, right? And certainly Gen AI is woven into every corner of our product. I think there are some learnings about how to make it successful, and that relates to having a clear end goal. I think that's often the end goal. How will you measure success? It's amazing. It seems obvious, but a lot of times that part is not well done at the start of a project, right? It's still fuzzy as to how will we know we captured value in the first place. And so if you're changing that definition of success during the project, well, you're probably not going to get what you hope to get. And then really understanding all the inputs and outputs that go with it is also really important. That's sort of independent of the core, Gen AI or agentic AI approach. And this is a challenge with carriers, right? Lots of disparate systems, disparate data standards, right? So I think those things contribute to failed projects, but I don't know that I've seen maybe what they mean is that there are an awful lot of in-house quick POCs that get stood up that don't see the light of day. And I think partly that's because, and every time I see these LinkedIn posts about companies, growing really fast in the Gen AI space, which is impressive, very, very few of them are selling to big enterprise. Big enterprise has InfoSec and system design and governance and data residency requirements that make it very difficult to just turn this on and have it be successful, 7 days later.
Yeah, I'll just put a word into when we see a lot of, just on the investment side, a lot of companies using AI capabilities, and they'll say, oh, we've got, X amount of customers and et cetera. And you dive in, and this is not, listen, it's hard to be a startup. You take credit where you can, but a lot of those engagements are POCs or pilot engagements, and there's no proof points of, to your point, conversion to a paid contract, multi-year contract with a large enterprise. And so it's difficult to say you're really sticky or you've got something differentiated. Are you just kind of in this world of carriers are going to try small pilots that are really not risky with a lot of different vendors before they make a choice? So it is hard it's hard on both sides, but yeah, some of it on the investment side is traction. It's not the kind of enterprise traction that we think, keeps.
I mean, Pearl, you have been very involved in sort of the change management aspects of technology transformation. To me, that's the number one predictor of success. Do you have change management lined up and ready to go? Maybe you could kind of share some stories from your travels there.
So I agree with both of you. When I looked at the study, I was like, it's very narrowly focused on pilots. And as you rightly pointed out, many AI pilots in large insurance companies are little hobby horses. Oh, let's test this out. There is no hypothesis behind what is my current pain point? What do I need for my business to run more effectively? And therefore, so instead of saying, I will move fast and break things in a very large organization and see whether it has any outcome, you almost need to start with what outcomes do I want to drive with what this technology is making me giving me capability to do. So for me, it's the study is a warning signal rather than a death sentence that Gen AI is not a hobby horse. It's a serious technology which drives serious results and consumes serious amount of compute. Therefore, think through what is the governance that should be around signing off pilots. What are the integration points, even with MCP, which makes integration easier? But there are multiple legacy systems that are in a typical technology stack for an insurer. And what are the outcome metrics that I want that piece of technology or that intervention to deliver for me? So that clear business outcomes and tying them back to P&L metrics is really, to me, a very, very tangible way of fixing this problem of pilot purgatory.
There's a lot of anxiety too that I pick up from customers around the scalability of these solutions from internal builds, or any solution, even if it's a buy. And I don't mean scalability by, can it scale from 10,000 submissions to 100,000 submissions? Obviously, it has to do that. The scalability they're talking about is more organizational scalability. Can I go from one line of business to 10 lines of business, within the year? Can I go from underwriting to claims to policy servicing with this same approach, with this same investment? And I think the experience has been historically that it's very, very difficult to do that. That you may find a solution that you can tune and optimize for one use case in one line of business, but it's because of that, it becomes quite brittle and difficult to scale. And that makes it expensive and you don't capture the value you hope to. So that's certainly something we have invested and continue to invest a lot in, is that the sort of art of enterprise software is how to productize it enough, but also anticipate what's the joke, right? If you've met one insurance carrier, you've met one, right? Is the joke, meaning they're all so different that it's very hard to productize something in the that you sell to insurance carriers because of the need to have that flexibility and scalability.
Especially in the GRLC world, the really big reinsurance and large carriers, where each risk is bespoke, each contract is bespoke with its own
Right.
peculiarities. And so when we are talking about, okay, the war, terrorism, and political violence has been automated. The submissions we can do easily. And then you come to really complex ones like property with thousands of different types of submissions. And then you come to casualty, which has thousands and thousands of data sets which go into risk determination. So it's easier in retail, and you can't extrapolate retail into complex insurance. So completely agree with you that productizing is not as easy as it may sound, that we can productize. We've done WTPV, so now we move next to another line of business.
And that's true of builds as well, right? Even internal builds. I think the teams that I've seen have tried to do internal builds. They also, to use a machine learning team, they overfit to the use case they're trying to solve for, declare victory too early, and then when they're asked to replicate it across 10 or 15 other use cases, they almost have to start over from scratch.
Yeah, you're right. There's so many examples of in-house RAG implementations which just hallucinate all over the place, and then people just think, I was a great data scientist. What happened? Why doesn't this work? So and then they say, well, it's because it's non-deterministic. That's why the answers are not right. Probably the wrong technology.
Yes, exactly. Pearl, when you have, we're what now, maybe 2 to 3 years into Gen AI implementations. So you've probably observed a number of data points. Well, what if you were going to give people kind of 3 takeaways on using these technologies, especially in the context of soft market, need for efficiency, need for speed? What have you seen as conclusions that you would offer to carriers trying to embark on this or continue what they've started?
What I would say, Tom, is that this is a serious technology. Do not use it as a nano banana joke picture. It really can alleviate your pain points. So, with that in mind, think of where you have discovered a major inefficiency or pain point. It may be around really tough submissions, which come for a line of business which is very important for you. And start small experimentation in the largest point of pain point where you can see a realizable business benefit, which is so transparent and explicit that nobody can equivocate on that. They can't second guess you on that. So, very outcome focused around a major pain point. Take this as a serious technology, and it's not something that you wash your hands off and give it to IT. It is not an IT problem to solve, it's a business model problem that needs to be solved by using this piece of technology. So, that would be my insight, that if you want this technology to really deliver result and be useful to you, be respectful of where you use it. Do not use it on low value use cases where the benefits can be poo-pooed by people who may not tie into your agenda. But also, that brings in another part, is for a program to be successful, the CEO and the C-suite have to be in the driver's seat. And IT is an enabler, but not the sole owner. This is not an IT problem being solved. This is a business problem being solved by use of this technology.
I think ending on that sage advice from our guests is a great place to end. So this has been another episode of Unstructured Unlocked with our return guest, Parul Kalgreen, who is the founder and CEO of Udemy Consulting. Thank you so much, Parul, for having joined us again today. It was a great conversation.
Well, great. Thanks. So that'll be a wrap for another episode of Unstructured Unlocked. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thanks.